Hi, I'm Dr. Jamil Sayed, and on this podcast, we're going to talk about some deep stuff. I'm here to tell you that you're amazing, and often the only person who can't see that is you. No matter who you are, what you do, or where you're from, there's greatness in you. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Jamil Sayed, and welcome to the Transformation Starts Today podcast, where I interview leaders, champions, and high performers from all walks of life as they share their story, the lessons they've learned along the way, and empowering perspectives to help you create an extraordinary life without regret, starting today. Today we have with us Sunny Dawn Johnston. Sunny Dawn Johnston is an acclaimed psychic medium, changemaker, transformational thought leader, and spiritual business mentor. She's a weekly columnist for Women's World magazine, and the author of 24 books, including her flagship bestsellers, Invoking the Archangels and The Love Never Ends, which have become the cornerstones for many of her keynote topics, such as intuition, mediumship, and the angelic realm. Through her courses, private sessions, and live events, Sunny has grown and cultivated a diverse global community. Whether in person or online, her strong mentorship encourages thousands of students to connect with their heart and the core of their being and guide them to experience life in a higher vibrational, multi-dimensional way. Sunny, it's such an honor and a privilege to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Excited to be here, my friend.
Yeah, and so two things. So first, we were just joking about this before we got started. So this podcast is video and audio. So for anyone on video, I'm not in a old-fashioned, camera film development room. I'm not sure why it's red, but it is what it is, and we'll make the most of it. And the second thing I want to just share for our audience, who you are for me. And I remember years ago, about 4 years ago, I had this intuitive hit come to me, and it said, it's time for you to step into energy work. And this is something that I had a old friend of mine and a boss of mine who was a Reiki master, Japanese form of energy healing, for anyone who's not familiar. And he had told me that one day, he would teach me because he had felt that there was some type of, gift that was present. And I remember about 2 years went by and that intuition kicked in. I reached out to him and he ended up connecting me with you. And I flew back to Arizona after moving to New York from Arizona. And I remember just getting to get my life transformed as a result of our time together. Because it started, I didn't know exactly why I was going, other than this intuition was telling me it's time to do this. And working with you was the beginning of a process that opened up my ability to work with energy. And then that led me into my Hawaiian energy work, and then combining the two. And I've been so privileged and blessed to have the experience of facilitating these miraculous healings with people. And it all started with what you shared and taught with me. And so thank you so much for
Wasn't
being
that
here.
cool? I love it. I love it. And following that divine guidance and that intuition is, that gives you the evidence of why it's so important to listen to that gut feeling and listen to our spirit. So beautiful. Great job. Great
Thank you.
job.
Thank you. And so I'd love to, if you could share with our audience who doesn't know you yet, they haven't heard your story, who is Sunny? And what was it that brought you to where you are today? What were maybe some of the major catalysts, the lessons you learned along the way? Anything that you think we would benefit from hearing?
Sure. Well, gosh, who is Sunny? That is a complicated question right there. I would say if I was going to break it down, Sunny is a spirit having a human experience. And in this form today, she's called Sunny. But if I were going to go back, I started, I had experience. I think most of us that do this kind of work and do this consistently in our lives is because we've been this way probably all of our lives,
Mhm.
and maybe didn't always fit in or always noticed something was a little different or kind of tuned into different type of, like there's always, I find when I connect with people that are like-minded, like-hearted, that we all just kind of march to our own little beat. And so for me, I started having experiences seeing the spirit world. And the first one that I had, I was 13 years old, and I woke up in the middle of the night. And when I went to roll over, it was 1 o'clock. I looked at the clock and it was 1 o'clock straight up. And I rolled over. And when I rolled over, there was this beautiful colorful winged being above my bed.
Mm.
And when I saw with my physical eyes, my eyes were open, I saw this energy. What I was aware of was the way I felt. And the way I felt was like this unconditional love, this gentleness, this kindness, this compassion that I hadn't experienced in the human world. It felt so different to me. And it felt so calming though. And so gentle that I literally just laid there for a little bit, like, and
Mm.
then it felt so safe. You know, I'm 13. Wouldn't you think I'd like jump out of bed and be like, oh my God, there's something flying above my bed, right? But I wasn't. I was like, and I just rolled over and I went back to sleep. And the next morning I woke up and my head kicked in. And I'm like, and that's when, right, that's when the intellect kicked in. And my ego was like, oh my gosh, what was that? And so I ran downstairs. I told my mom what happened. And she said, well, Sunny, that's your guardian angel. And I said, I don't have one of those. And she says, well, of course you do. Everybody has a guardian angel. Like everybody's born with a guardian angel. I said, I don't have one. And if I do have one, she sucks because in my 13-year-old mind, my idea of a guardian angel was if there was such a thing, and just I'd made this up in my own head like that minute, but if there was a guardian angel that I had, then they should keep me safe and not let anything bad ever happen to me. Nothing bad. I shouldn't not feel like I don't fit in, like nothing bad should happen. And so if I did have one, she was not doing a great job, was my opinion. And so I told my mom again. Now I don't think that's what it was. And she goes, well, Sunny, listen, last night at 11 o'clock last night, I went up into your room and I prayed over you. And I asked God and the angels to protect you because I've been worried about your mental state. And she had a reason to worry. I was not in a good place mentally. And so when she said that to me, Jamil, what clicked was I had awakened to the manifestation of my mother's prayer.
Mm.
And I didn't understand it. I didn't actually still believe that it was a guardian angel, but I knew that I had experienced that. I knew that was real. And I knew that my mother was telling me the truth in her experience. And so what that did at the age of 13, which was 40 years ago, was it got me curious. And I've followed curiosity ever since. And so it opened the door to what else is there? If I just had this experience, and I'd always been sensitive, I'd always been called an empath, like all of those things, but what else is out there? And so I didn't know at that time, you know, I was thinking, okay, well, I want to feel that again. Like that was the coolest thing ever. It felt so peaceful. Like, okay, how do I get that again? And so this is what I did. This is a little bit of a long story, but it's pretty entertaining. So I went to the library because I'm a smart girl, and if I don't understand something and I don't really think that I can get any information, now this is in the early 80s, okay, in Salt Lake City, Utah. So I go to the library and I go up to the librarian and I said, I'm looking for books on how to talk to your guardian angel. And she looks at me and she says, the occult section. And I didn't even know what that meant at that time, right? So she tells me, you know, I got the whatever that, I can't remember, the Dewey Decimal System, whatever. So I go find the occult section, and there are 3 different kinds of books in the occult section in Salt Lake City in the 80s. There was astrology, numerology, and runes, reading runes. And so I kind of flipped through them and I'm like, oh, well, there's nothing on angels. Like I had no idea, you know, I'm a young kid. I had no idea. So there's nothing on angels here, but I checked out all 3 of those books because I'm like, okay, I guess that's what I'm supposed to get. Took them home, realized, okay, there's nothing here. But when I got that answer, basically, I go to the occult section and nothing was there, then I'm like, well, what do I do? So I did what made the most sense to me, which was I just asked. So this was my prayer at 13. I wouldn't have called it a prayer because I wasn't a prayer type of girl growing up. I was raised in a very religious environment, and my family was religious on all sides, but my parents had left the church, so I wasn't raised in that, although I was brought up all around it. And so I I just went into my bedroom and I said, hello, if you're still there, will you come back, please? That was my prayer. And the crazy, miraculous, amazing thing was that they did. And I started having experiences of seeing not only the guardian angel that I had already seen, but I started seeing Archangel Michael and Archangel Raphael. And they came to me with color and with vibration and with energetic, like I would translate it as emotion. And I literally started taking class. And they would come and I'd write down what color they were, what I felt like, what I saw. And then another day, something else would come. And that's actually how I started learning about the angels at the age of 13, was literally, that was my prayer and it was answered.
That's amazing.
It was pretty darn cool. Now that I think of it, every time I tell the story, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I remember I got to when we first met, I purchased your book, the Invoking the Archangels book, and getting to read through it and hear your stories. And there's a story in there that I have shared with so many people because it so resonates with me. And maybe you can share it. It's the one where your brother ran outside in the blue bubble. Can you share that? Because that's so powerful.
So that actually was about 2 months after this situation happened. My parents had gone out to dinner because there was a lot of fighting and arguing and stuff like that in our house at the time. And so they'd gone out to dinner to kind of do that away from the kids. And it was just me and my little brother. So I was 13 and he was 5. And so they left, and they'd never left me alone with him before. Most girls, especially back then, were babysitting kids at 10, 11, 12, 13, but I wasn't one of them. And there were reasons for that, mostly because I didn't have a lot of patience. And I didn't really like kids, quite honestly. Like I wasn't like all the other kids. So I'm like, I don't need to do that. But they decided to leave me home alone with him. And so he was upstairs playing, and he was also a very sensitive kid, and he was different too. So the way he was different was he had friends that nobody could see, that we would call imaginary friends, except for they're not, except for that's, what they were titled then. And they were circles, squares, and triangles with wings. And they were all primary colors. And so he would, when we would go like to the grocery store, or we'd go for a walk, or would get in the car, his friends had to come with us. And they'd have to be like, they have to get in the car, and we'd have to seatbelt them in. And I mean, it was crazy. And when I was 13, I didn't have a lot of patience and tolerance for what I felt like was his just imagination and making it up. Even though I'd had some of these experiences now, I still was like, whatever, he's just being, 5, I guess. So to give that as kind of a preface. So this particular night, my parents left. About 20 minutes after they leave, he comes running downstairs, and he's like, Sunny, all of my friends are gone, and now they're black and brown and green frowny faces. And I'm like, oh my God, seriously. What am I going to do? Because I didn't believe him, right? I'm like, he's just making this up. And so I'm like, okay, I think, okay, I'm going to be the big sister here. So I grab his hand, and I'm going to take him upstairs, and I'm going to do literally what I was thinking at that time was, I'm just going to do abracadabra and ta-da, and then it should all be back together, right? Like that was my idea. So I grabbed his hand, I went to go up the stairs. And when I went to take a step up the stair, literally there was like a force that pushed me back. And then that scared the shit out of me. So then I grabbed his hand and I ran to the far back corner of the house where we had a brick wall, and we sat up against the brick wall, and my parents were gone for like hours and hours. So we sat there the whole night. I wouldn't leave because I was afraid now. And when my parents got home, I told them what happened. And my mom had a friend in Salt Lake City, Utah, who was like an underground psychic, because those were not acceptable in that town at that time. And so she said, I'll call Leo and I'll ask her to come over, and she'll do a clearing on the house. I didn't even know what that meant, but she said, she'll do a clearing on the house, and then everything will be fine. Like, it was just like that too. Like, okay, well, that'll be fine. So I'm like, all right, well, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about because this is scary energy. And so anyway, I think we slept with my parents that night. Get up the next morning. Uh, my little brother goes out and this was like springtime. So he goes out and he's riding his big wheel up in front of the house. He doesn't know anything about anything that's going on. Leo comes over and she goes into the foyer of the house and she says, okay, gal, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to invite Archangel Michael in. Now, I'd already had this starting to have these lessons and teachings with Michael, but I didn't have enough awareness even to put the things to, it didn't even click for me yet. So she said, we're going to invite Archangel Michael in and we're going to have him clear the space. And I'm like, I don't, I don't know if that's going to work or not, but okay, whatever. So I'll play along. So we hold hands and she says, okay, we're going to close our eyes and I'm going to do this invocation that's going to bring in the energy to clear the space of any of the negativity that's here. And I'm thinking, I don't think this is going to work, but we do. So we hold our hands and she says, okay, so let's close our eyes. And so they close their eyes and I close one eye. And I close one eye because if Archangel Michael's going to show up, I want to see him first off. And I want to also be sure that he's doing what he needs to do. I'm 13, but this is my brain, right? So I close one eye, got my other eye open, and she does an invocation. It was longer than this, Jamil, but the idea of it was that she said something to the effect of, like, I invoke the blue light of Archangel Michael to surround this home, to protect this home from any negative energy or entities, seen or unseen. And it went on longer than that, but that's the gist of it. And so after that, okay, like nothing happened. I didn't see anything. There was no blue light. There was no flash of anything. Like nothing happened. So then she said, okay, take a deep breath. We do. And okay, you can open your eyes. So they open their eyes. I open my one eye. And my mom, who's also an empath, she goes, oh, it already feels so much better in here. And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm just about to say, like, okay, but it didn't work. So I don't know what feels better because it didn't work because nobody showed up. Right. So I'm just about to say that. And my little brother comes running. He opens the front door because we're standing right there. He opens the front door. Remember, he's 5. And he says, Mommy, there is a great big blue bubble around our house. And I was like, huh. And my mom is like, well, that's Archangel Michael. And Leo was like, that's Archangel Michael. He came in and he cleared the space for us. And I'm like, yeah, but nothing happened. And so this is what I learned from this experience. So the first thing I learned is that I am a natural feeler. I'm a clairsentient, call them empaths, right? I feel for the most part. I mean, I have all of the gifts in the sense, but because we all do, but feeling was my strongest attribute. And I was focused on trying to see, but I'm a feeler. So I missed the feeling experience, which then I interpreted as nothing happened. My mother, who's a feeler, just like me, had the experience and had the feeling. So I learned from that you have to pay attention and be mindful and listen to what your natural intuitive attribute is first and foremost, because that's like the greatest gift. And it's usually the one that's most challenging for you personally. Being an empath has been difficult for my whole life because I'm so sensitive in that way. So that was the first thing I learned. The second thing I learned is that when you invite the angels into your space, whether you see them or feel them, whether you hear them or recognize their presence, they are there immediately. Regardless of your understanding or your limited perspective of their presence is there. And that was a powerful teaching that 40 years later, I still use and teach because it still has significance in my life every single day.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the story, and I so love it. I remember reading that in the book, going, I was like highlighting it like crazy. Like, this is amazing.
It was awesome,
Yeah.
and it was amazing.
Yeah, a few things that you shared that I want to point out for our audience. You said first, following curiosity, what else is out there? And prior to meeting you and getting involved in this type of work, there's so many aspects of the work I do now and things I've experienced firsthand that if you asked me 3 years, like 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have thought that was fiction, fantasy. And now seeing, oh, there's so much here. And it is truly incredible. And so the invitation for everyone listening, if it's not already apparent, be willing to be open-minded. And like Sunny said something earlier, for what else is out there. And then like what has always been the case, like I've always known it to be true, but I haven't been leaning into it.
Mhm.
And what if as an invitation, you started leaning into it? You could always go back to doing what you've been doing. But what
Right.
if you attempted, lean in, follow that intuition, that inner knowing that's been speaking to you your whole life potentially, and what could be possible for you if you opened
Right.
up to it?
And what can be possible out here? So yes, there's a possibility for you, but when you embrace that, just like you have, Jamil, you embrace that, look at the possibilities you're creating for everybody else.
Yeah. The
Like
ripple.
that's where I think it moves from what a lot of people would be like, okay, doing it for myself versus doing it for humanity. Because sometimes we can't get over ourselves, but when we go, oh, I could be of service, right? Then it's like, look what you can do for every person you come in contact with, how you can expand their minds and how you can shift their awareness and how you can tap into that energy that they may never have known about. And for you, being a doctor, what you can do to help people to heal in a way that mainstream medicine may not have worked. That now you have the ability to open them up into a new perspective if they're willing, and that's fine. But if they're willing,
You're reminding me of there's a book that I read about a year ago. It's a small little square book called The Butterfly Effect. And it's kind of half picture and big. You can finish it in like 10 minutes, but it's phenomenal. And it speaks to what you were just describing. We each of us has an opportunity with every decision that we make to create this immense ripple effect. And you're impacting without realizing it everyone around you, if not even the entire world. Because there's an action that you took, and then that led to something happening, which led to something happening, and then downstream 50, things, the world changed in a really big way, but none of it would have happened if you didn't do what you did first.
exactly.
And so I think we undervalue or underappreciate, the impact of one decision.
Yes.
Yeah. And so
Yes.
with that, there's something you said earlier that I want to, get your opinion on, because my understanding, which sounds like it's similar to yours, is that everyone is psychic, even if they would use a different word to describe it. And at the same time, different people seem to access those abilities to varying degrees. Some people consciously never feel like they've accessed any of it. Some people, it's just full blown, all of it. And some people, it's kind of a gradual progression over their
Yep.
life. Can you
Yes.
explain your understanding of why that is?
Yeah. Well, so from what I've learned, what the angels started teaching me way back then was that we have different ways that we receive that intuitive guidance from the spirit world. It's the different languages, and they're called the clairs, right? So it's clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. It's clairaudience, which is clear hearing. It's claircognizance, which is clear knowing. Clairsentient, which is clear feeling. And then there's also clairgustance and clairfragrant, which are smell and taste. So most of the time, we go to the basic four: seeing, hearing, feeling, knowing. Seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing. So those are the four basic ones. Now, all of us have all those channels. So if we think of it as like in our humanness, we have the capability of learning any language. The capability. We don't know all the languages, but we have the capability of learning all the languages. So all of those clairs, all of the languages to the spirit world, they all exist within us. We have the ability to learn all of them, to activate all of them. However, we're born into a physical body that is energetically connected to a particular route, let's say, which is what we would say our strongest attribute. So for me, I'm clairsentient. That's my strongest attribute. So that's the one that if I look back on my life, and this is always great for those of you that are watching or listening, to look back on your life and see, okay, how was I when I was a child? Did I just know things and I didn't know why I knew them? Was I more of a feeler and emotional and felt everybody's pain and felt people's sadness and wanted to fix everybody and help everybody? That might have been a clairsentient. Was I visual? Did I have dreams all the time? Was I really externally creative in the visual sense? Or was I somebody that would hear those little messages, that little voice within would talk to me all the time, or I overheard things that really were symbolic to me. So when we look back, oftentimes we can see, okay, this is the one attribute that is the strongest. And when we nurture that attribute, when we have the support to nurture it, I should say, then that expands, and that's like the key that unlocks the door to all of the others. But when we don't have that nurturing, when we don't have that recognition, we kind of ignore it, deny it, push it away, don't even have the awareness that it's there, then it's much harder to access those other channels. And so oftentimes what happens is a circumstance or situation will happen that'll open that channel up consciously. So we have awareness of it. For me, it was that experience with my guardian angel at 13. I'd had other experiences, but it was never clicked. And then I was like, oh, right. So sometimes that's the death of somebody. Sometimes it's a diagnosis. Sometimes it's a scary accident. Like there's different ways that kind of activate that. But once we have that, what we know is that we all are, if you want to, a lot of people don't like the word psychic. Actually, in my classes, I ask people, and most people won't raise their hands. But then after I explain it, they're like, oh, okay, well, we're all psychic. So we're all psychic. But some people feel safer to use the word intuitive. Intuition feels more gentle. It feels safer. It doesn't feel like so in your face and not so much ownership, right? Like kind of I'm intuitive. Things happen sometimes versus I'm psychic is like a proclamation, right?
Yeah.
So when we start to open up to those channels, and especially when we start learning about our natural intuitive gift, that unlocks all of them that we all have. We have all of them, everybody.
I remember one of my teachers, he mentioned something that you alluded to today, where he said, that imaginary friend you had as a child is probably real.
Yeah,
And so
for sure.
coming from that same space, I'd imagine that if somebody is a child and they grow up around a family that is open and supportive of encouraging and, like you said, nourishing, let's say, these type of experiences, that those, let's say, gifts, even though they're always present, it's almost like there's the old expression like you don't, if you don't use it, you lose it. In this case, I think it's more if you don't use it, you just kind of become unaware of it.
Yep.
You don't lose it, it's always there, like you said.
Right.
But would love to hear, how do we typically get in our own way and block our ability to experience, let's say, the higher sensory versions of our typical senses?
Sure. So a couple things that stood out when you were saying that. The first thing is, and I have this happen, I've been teaching for 25 years, and every single class probably, I will have somebody say something like, in some form of, it was so weird. This weird thing happened the other day. I had the weirdest dream. It was so weird that I just had this feeling, and then so-and-so called me. So what we do is when we use the word weird, it negates the gift of our nature. It's who we are. We are spirit before we're a body, right? We're the spirit in this physical body. Without the spirit, this body is nothing. It's a bag of bones, right? Skin and bones. So we're spirit before. We have that language. We had that connection beforehand. So when every time that any of us use the word weird or strange or odd, it's negating the nature of who we are. So that's first and foremost. What we want to do is we want to say, I have this cool thing, this awesome thing, this exciting thing, this interesting. If you're not quite sure, say interesting. That at least keeps the energy open, right? So it's negating that. That's one of the things we do because we don't understand it. That's why, because we don't understand it. And what we do as human beings when we don't understand something is we usually push it away. There's not many people that like go, oh, let me figure this out. I want to dive in. Most people go, oh, I don't know about that. Let's just put it over here. Now, that's usually because of our training too, our environment. If we didn't have an environment where people were open, like, luckily for me, my mother was open. My environment around me, very closed. So it wasn't safe for me to explore this outside of my small little home, right? But I had at least that support. And even with that, Jamal, what happened for me is that um, I struggled with the support and the embracing of it, and then the wanting to be normal and be like everybody else. And so I'd have these cool experiences, and I'd have these intuitions, and I'd have that Archangel Michael showing up, and seeing my guardian angel, and literally, like, my life has been saved by the angels. And then I would be like, I just want to be normal like everybody else. And I had this push pull, even though I had the support in my home. I was so unusual. I was so weird, right? That I just wanted to be normal, and whatever normal was. So I did this, what I would call this push against for 15 years. I did this. Oh, it's really cool. Nope, I don't want to do it. Oh, it's really cool. Nope, I don't want to do it. And I think that's what happens for a lot of people is, number one, they don't have the conscious awareness of it. They're not even aware. There are people that are in this world that are living in the 3D world that just think it's 3D. They just think it's just this physical, what you see is what you get, and there's nothing outside of that. And it isn't that that's not their experience, it's that they're not open to seeing broader from there. They pass it off intellectually as, oh, well, that was the light that was cascading down from the reflection of the mirror, that was that orb that I saw. And sometimes we think orbs are those things, and they are camera lenses and fractal, whatever those things are. Like, yes, sometimes that's the case, but not always, right? Sometimes it is that you want your loved one to be with you when they've passed, but not always. Sometimes they are with you, right? So it's not an extreme. It's not all or nothing. And I think that for a lot of people that never had that support, it's difficult for them to identify with anything that they can't touch, that they can't see, that they can't experience. But what I always try to remind people is our intuition is all of those same senses, just internally.
Yeah.
Seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing, but inside. It's the spirit's perspective of that, not the physical perspective of that. And I think we were meant to be, those two are meant to be in alignment. They're meant to be connected. We separated them. Humans separated them.
Yeah, I'm reminded of, I think one of the most common examples of this, and you talked about it for a moment, that most of our listeners have probably had this experience where you can go one or both ways. Either somebody calls you, and before you even look at the phone, you just get a hit of who it is. And then you pick up your phone and you were right. Or you think about somebody that you haven't spoken to or connected with in quite some time. It could be years or decades. And then in the next couple hours, in the next day or two, you get a text from them or you get a call from them and they go, hey, it's been a while. I was just thinking about you. And we chalk it up to, oh, what a coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so weird.
But if the phone rings and it's upside down and I just get a hit, oh, it's John. And then I pick it up and it's John. What's that? There's got to be something more than just
Right.
a coincidence, especially with the amount of people who've had that experience. And it's not that it happens once. It
Right.
typically happens several times, throughout
Right.
our life, but typically not when we're consciously trying to do it. It's when
Right.
we're in that more kind of unconscious receptive space.
Yes.
We pick
Yes.
up.
And I think it's important too to help people understand what the word coincidence means, because we just understand it wrong. It's because what coincidence is for two things to come together in perfect divine order. Perfect divine order. So in the dictionary, it probably says for two things to come together in order, but it's perfect divine order. So coincide, come together in divine order. It's saying coincidence isn't what we understand a coincidence to be. A coincidence is spirit guided.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love, both either with etymology or when you just have a different definition to a word and it changes your entire experience of what it is.
Yeah. Anytime somebody says coincidence, I'm like, huh, all right, I'm seeing where you're going, right? Because they don't always understand it. I do. I see a bigger, broader perspective that they can't see right now because, well, that was just, again, so weird. But hello, this is divine. It's not weird. It's divine. And guess what? You might have an interpretation of what they are, but those are the same damn thing.
Yeah, I'm reminded of both the placebo effect and the nocebo effect, where both basically there's a positive belief and a negative belief that impacts your experience. And one, when you have the negative on the nocebo side, you believe something bad is going to happen, and it does, or you believe something good is going to happen, and it does. Not always, but more often than not. And we often chalk it up to the equivalent of saying, oh, it's the placebo, AKA it's almost like not important, or we can kind of toss it away. When you
Mhm.
have these pharmaceutical companies that are spending tens to hundreds of millions of dollars because the placebo is doing as well as like 40 to 80% of their studies. And then
Right.
you sit there going, this person had this condition or this, like, let's say they needed a surgery. And there's placebo surgery studies that have been done, and there's placebo medication studies on any kind of double-blind placebo-controlled study. And you sit there saying, well, if by placebo I mean like it doesn't do anything, nothing's going to happen.
Mhm.
Why does all this effect happen? Because
Right.
of our internal belief, because of that knowing, because of this congruence and the alignment of I'm taking this thing, I'm having this experience, and it's going to lead to that.
Right.
And you're so certain of it that in a fairly large percentage of the experience, it happens. And so, just like with coincidence or placebo, there's this word that we use to almost downplay
Yep.
whatever is going on or diminish it.
Yes.
When I remember a mentor of mine, he passed away, but he was a physician in hospitals, and he would talk about I forgot what floor it was, but he's on a floor where it's like an intensive unit, and there was this gentleman there, and this guy was going through really massive drug withdrawal, and he was pinned down to the bed because he was getting violent. And
Mhm.
as he's laying there, every time a nurse came in or someone came in, he would yell at them and curse at them, and he was really nasty because he just wanted to be given the drug. And so the doctor is about to walk in and he knows what's going on. And all the nurses have been complaining about this guy on the floor. Nobody can calm him down. He's making a big issue. And the doctor looks at the nurse before he walks in. He goes, just play along with whatever I say. And then they walk in and the guy goes, Doc, oh my God, thank God you're here. And he says, you got to give it to me. Like, I need it. And the doctor goes like, Tim, like, I can't do that. Like, I'd lose my license. And he goes, Doc, please, I won't tell anybody, I swear. And then he goes, and he purposely makes this look on his face as if he's considering it. And the guy picks up on it, and the guy goes, "Come on, please! Like I promise, I won't tell anyone, just between you and I." And he's like, "Well, you really got to make sure you don't tell anyone." The nurse is playing along, so the nurse starts like yelling at the doctor, "You can't do that! Like I'm gonna report you!" And he goes like, and he like kind of yells at her, and she leaves. And then he goes into his medical kit. He comes back with this syringe with this liquid.
Saline syringe.
He flicks it a few times, and the guy goes, "What's that, doc?" And he goes, "It's really powerful stuff." And he injects it into the guy's IV. And within seconds, the guy who is in so much pain and so agitated and all these different things completely relaxes. And for the next several days, he's the sweetest, calmest, gentlest person on the whole floor. And all of his problems are gone. The doctor gave him salt water. And you sit there and you go, well, should we say that was nothing or should that doctor get an award?
Right.
That's
Well,
an
and it's so funny because um when my kids were young and they would have like a headache or just random kinds of nothing when it was serious I actually did something, but most of the time I would tell them, honey, listen, your mind actually can take care of this itself. Let's just focus on it. And most of the time, they're like, no, mom, just give me the whatever. So I had little sugar pills that were like kind of like we have homeopathy now,
yeah.
that so I would just give them one of those and I'd say, okay, this will help with whatever. And their stomach 20 minutes later would feel better. Their head would feel better because I know that I mean, and now, thank God, back then, science wasn't really showing this. Now, science is showing, oh, hey, if you believe something to be true, your body follows and responds to that truth. And I love that. And don't even get me started on pharmaceuticals because that's a whole other conversation. However, I love that you've shared that story because it is so absolutely 100% true. And whenever I'm working with people that because when you're doing energy work, as you know, Jamil, when you're doing energy work, a lot of it is manifestations of people's fear and so they're having real experiences. We're not negating that they're having real pain, real struggle, diagnosed illness and disease, and when you get in their energy field and you can feel their fear and their anger and their resentments and their pains and all those things and help them start to transmute that and shift that, you see the healing. And it happens all the time.
Yeah.
All the freaking time. And people they don't want to recognize it, I think, just mostly because of the way we've been trained.
Yeah. Yeah, the word trained is an interesting word, that and conditioned. This
Yes.
idea that the average patient, let's say in a conventional medical model, you've got something going on and you're really, let's say, bothered by it, and you go to your healthcare provider. And so many of us have been trained and conditioned in this Western society, like the pill for every ill kind of mindset, that it turns into if I go to the doctor and I share what's going on, if I leave with like lifestyle recommendations and changes to make, I often feel like cheated because I didn't get the prescription. Like I didn't
Right.
leave with something, like the doctor didn't give me anything. And
Right.
I remember seeing that in so many medical practices that I've been in and been a part of. And it's an interesting perspective that we've been conditioned to believe that we need, let's
Right.
say, that pill. And so in that example with you and your kids, here you are giving that sugar pill, but because they believe, oh, this is going to make me all better,
Yep.
some large
And then
percentage.
teaching them from there, okay, listen, buddy. So a couple of years later, as they got a little bit older, hey, that wasn't ever anything. It was literally just a sugar pill. That shows you the power of your mind, right? So I didn't realize, and so I want to be 100% clear here. I didn't realize then that I was actually setting them up to think they needed something because
Yeah.
they weren't in a place to be recognizing enough, too young to recognize that they could heal it. So I thought this was a better choice than just giving them the pill, right? However, it did set them up. And my older son had a very strong belief in, I need something. My younger son didn't at all. So also the personalities, because I did the same thing with different children at different times. They had different responses, right? And my older son ended up having a drug addiction, and that was a big struggle for him. And it wasn't ever intentional on planting a seed in that way. It was trying to teach him the power of his mind. However, in that also, I think there was a seed that got planted of, I need something. I don't have that power, even though the intention was different. If that makes sense. So just to be transparent.
Yeah, yeah. And also just for our listeners, because some people may be thinking this, and that's why I want to voice it. There is a time and a place, for
Yes.
pharmaceutical medication. And so it's not saying just give the sugar pill always.
Right.
There's a
Right.
time and a place where that's appropriate. But the
Yes.
idea is that it's not always.
Right.
I'll give you
Right.
an example. This is a horrible thing that happens all the time in medical practice. Somebody will show up and they'll have all of the symptoms of a viral infection. And because the doctor knows or the healthcare provider knows this patient really wants to leave with something, and if I tell them, hey, you made an appointment, you paid a copay, you waited in the waiting room, now you're here, and for me to tell you, stay hydrated, it'll pass in like a week.
Yep.
Most people would get upset by that, so they write them a script for an antibiotic.
Yep.
And the thing
Yep.
is, antibiotic isn't going to do anything to a viral
Exactly.
infection, but it is going to mess up your gut microbiome.
There
And
is.
so you're actually hurting the person by giving them that. But there's this almost like conditioned pressure
Yes.
of I have to give something. And so there's
Yep.
a time and place for medication, and there's a time and there's I wouldn't say there's a time and a place to believe in your body's ability to heal, 'cause I think it's always the case. But I also would say there's a time and a place for some additional support.
Yes.
Can be very life-saving.
Yes. And that's really important, is I think our body knows what it's supposed to do to heal, and sometimes we need extra support and intervention.
Yeah. Now,
Mhm.
something that you mentioned earlier, for those of us who believe, let's say, that we grew up in an environment that wasn't supportive and nourishing for these type of abilities to be, let's say, it's like a seed getting watered and then it
Yeah.
blooms. What are some kind of fundamental or foundational practices that we can begin doing to open up those gifts in terms of our awareness of them and then begin to like make them blossom even more?
I think, Jamil, the first thing is find community. Find like-minded people. Find people that are also working their intuitive muscle. If intuition is like a muscle, if you don't work it out, it doesn't get worked, right? So if you don't start paying attention to it, it's not that it isn't there, it's always there, but it's not activated. So we've got to activate our muscles. And so we've got to develop that muscle. So one of the things that I've spent a lot of my career is teaching people how to listen to their intuition, giving them, developmental exercises. And that's why I wrote so many books and teach so many workshops, is to help people get into that space of recognizing that at some point, if we can get to a place where over and above anything else, we listen to our intuition. Over and above anything else, we listen to our intuition. That starts to get you to a place where you have personal power, where you recognize your truth, where you're not a follower, where you can really be in total power of yourself and your choices. And so that is in practicing on a day-to-day basis. And it is simple. It is as simple as like some of the exercises that I'll give is like, okay, when you go out to, you're at the mall and you go out to get your car, what color cars are going to be next to yours? And tune in. This is not guessing. So there's a difference. Guessing is just like, I think maybe purple, right? Versus, and tuning in, feeling into my car, looking at the space next to my car and going blue and green, right? And then I go out. And if I get a hit, yay, and I want to celebrate that. That's a validation. The more validations you get, the more you start to believe in yourself. We focus on the hits, not the misses. When we focus on the misses, we get more misses because then we second guess ourselves. We focus on the hits. Okay, yeah, I did really good on that one. You're going to go to work in the morning and you usually are next to, 3 people that work in your same area. What color clothing are they going to have on? What are they wearing a hat today? Like starting to tune into everyday normal life things. When you answer the phone, tuning into who is it that's calling, right? When you go to your emails, before you open it up, how many emails do you have? Did you get the response to the person that you were waiting for? Like tuning into life when we start to, because intuition is tune into. Okay, we want to tune into the energy of life, and it can happen every minute of every day if you're actually open to that. And then, of course, if we want to activate it greater, meditation is going to be really important. Doing energy work, Reiki, energy work, hands-on healing on yourself, that helps activate that and open you up to starting to pay more attention to what's going on within your own mind, your own body, your own spirit. I love journaling because I think journaling clears out a bunch of the ego garbage so that you can be more tuned in to your spirit. When I think about meditation, so many people, I think, get meditation confused, or at least they have an idea that it has to be very restrictive. Like, okay, I need to sit, my legs crossed, I need to Om for 2 hours, and then I will have meditated. And there's lots of different forms of meditation, guided meditation and visual imagery meditation, but you can do walking meditation. There's so many kinds. But one of the things that I have taught a lot that I think is valuable for people to hear, especially from somebody who's taught meditation and created 20 meditations myself. Meditation for me is not a time where I am receiving guidance. People look and they go, okay, I'm going to meditate on that. I'm going to listen for the answer. Meditation to me, I start every morning out with meditation. And the reason I do that is to acknowledge the spirit within me. So it's almost like I'm plugging in to that connection, not because I have to, because I never unplugged. But for me, as the humanness that is Sunny, to acknowledge that my spirit is connected to me and I want to be guided by my spirit, not by my humanness as Sunny. So when I do this meditation, which might be 3 minutes one day, 30 minutes the other day, it's different based on my life, and I'm plugging in, it's not so that I get something, that I get a message. It's so that when I plug in then, it's so that I am connected for the other 23 and a half hours of the day. Yeah. So that then my intuition comes throughout my life experience every minute. It's not, okay, let me get quiet and do what I need to do so that I can receive the message now. It's let me tap in and be connected and tap into my spirit so that in my day-to-day activities, I am open and I am present to hear the messages from spirit, to listen to my intuition, to be open to those subtleties that the angels are guiding me to. Because then I am in alignment with the truth of who I am, instead of just letting Sunny, the ego that thinks, oh, well, I need to do this, this, and this, drive the car. I don't want her driving the car. I want my spirit to drive the car, because my spirit is here on purpose. Right? So I think sometimes helping have a little bit different perspective of meditation helps people, because so often my students come in and they're like, okay, well, I'm going to meditate on this subject. And I'm not saying not to meditate on things. I think that can be great. But the answer isn't always revealed in your 15-minute meditation. The answer, the guidance, the direction, the support is revealed the other 23 and a half hours of the day.
Yeah. Something that came up to me when you were sharing the story is there's two types of, when we're trying to create a change in our world, and let's say we're building a new habit, or let's say in the context of what we're talking about, somebody's trying to open up, these abilities in a way that's conscious for them. You can focus on what's the same, or you can focus on what's different. If you focus on what's the same, it'll seem like to you nothing's changing. It'll feel like the same situation is perpetuating and it's not working, whatever it is you're trying to do. But if you focus on what's different, that's noticing what's new. And like what you just talked about, where, you ask yourself, what are the color cars next to my car at the airport? And you say, like, blue and green, like you say, and then you walk up and they are blue and green. And it's even like the side on each one that you saw in your mind, let's say. And then if you celebrate that, or the phone rings and, oh, it's Mary, and you were right, and you celebrate that, now it's like there's a perspective I take that what we appreciate appreciates.
Yes.
And so by giving that acknowledgement, by noticing what's different, by noticing the new, you give it more, let's say, it's almost like from a neuroscience perspective, the reticular activating system being the part of the mind, or part of the brain rather, that is designed to have you be aware of the things that you've deemed to be important. And so when you say something matters, something's important, something's relevant for your life, you see it usually everywhere.
Yes.
But when you say when you don't even know something exists, or you're not aware of it, or you don't think it's important, you barely notice it, but it can be right in front of your face and you missed it. And so in that same way with what you're sharing, it really makes sense to me that as we acknowledge ourselves and celebrate ourselves, when these experiences start to happen for us, and another way of thinking about it in my mind, it's like a little kid walks up to you and they did like an aspect of what you asked them to do, but it wasn't completely what you asked them to do. Now, if you celebrate and thank them for doing the thing that you asked them to do, they're going to likely do that more. But if it's not exactly what you wanted and you get angry and you yell at them,
right,
they're less likely to do the thing that they were doing that was good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's like a positive reinforcement kind of thing.
That is a lived experience right here.
And the other thing I would love to get your perspective on, this is more of a big picture question, but for you, what is healing, and what does it entail?
I think healing is a journey that we're all on the entire time we're here.
Yeah.
I think it's learning, and I think it's expanding, and I think it's growing, and I don't think there's an end to it. So, I think as soon as you think you're at the end, it's gonna get serious.
Yeah.
So, I don't think that I feel like a lot of people, especially when like they'll come to me and they're starting with, a particular journey of healing, an aspect that maybe is new to them, and they feel like, I get this 100 times a month at least. Oh, I already worked on that. Yep, we're still here. Sorry, we're still here. Yeah. Right. So a lot of times we think that I did all this work. I shouldn't have to do this again. Like, I went to counseling for 30 years and now you're bringing it up again. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's just because there's a little more to do. And people get very upset and offended. And what I always want to remind people about is that doesn't negate any of the work you've done. All of the work you did is what got you to here, right? What it does is it says, there's another layer. And, there was a time in my life, probably in my 30s, I'm 53 now, so probably my early 30s. And I had a very unusual life. And I had a lot of lot of experiences, a lot of pain, a lot of struggle. So when I was in my like early 30s, I was like, I think like the rest of my life's gonna be so freaking easy because like I have learned so much and I have done so much and I've experienced so much. Like I'm gonna have it all figured out. I really did think this. I'm gonna have it all figured out, and it's just gonna be so much better because there's all these areas I've learned so much in, right? That didn't happen. Nope. Still right here with y'all, learning and growing and expanding and healing. And so what has come into my awareness probably 10 years after that was, oh, this is just a progression. And actually it's progression, not even just from year to year here on physical, but then from life to life afterwards. It's just a progression of expansion, of wisdom, of knowledge, of healing. And I think sometimes it's like a big downer for people, and we're never done.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you're done, then you go. Like as soon as you're done with what you need to experience, learn, expand into here, you're going home and you'll come back. And then I have clients say, oh no, I'm not coming back. I'm like, oh, don't you worry, I'll see you.
I'm reminded of two things. One is in the 1800s, the US Patent Office, there was a strong push for it to close down because the sentiment at the time was everything that can be invented has already been invented. So what's the
Oh,
point
wow.
of space around? And so you see like how wrong they were. And it's looking
Yep.
back, it's comical as how much has been invented. But at the time, that was real for them. And to
Yes.
me, that's very similar to like you talked about. Somebody will say, well, I've already worked on that. And the thing is, there's two ways to think about healing as a linear process and as a cyclical or spiral process.
Yep,
And the
exactly.
linear process is, well, I already dealt with that, therefore it's never going to happen again, which in my experience doesn't happen. And then there's the cyclical process, which is you will revisit similar themes and patterns, but you revisit it hopefully at a higher vantage point where you deal with it in a more, let's say, aligned and from love way. Where to keep it simple, like numerically, something happened in the past and it was 10 out of 10 anger response from you. Then you do all this work on it, then it happens again, almost like the universe or life saying, "Hey, let me just see like how you do.
Let's check in here.
Let's
Yes.
check in." And now your 10 out of 10 is a 5. Now, if you make it binary, I thought I dealt with this. Why am I angry right now? That's different. You're going to feel, let's say, disempowered and discouraged because whatever you did, quote unquote, didn't work.
Right.
Or you think of it as, well, it used to be a 10. Now it's a 5. And you celebrate that. And then you keep going up that like spiral staircase of life, and life presents a similar situation. And now you got a 2 out of 10.
Mhm.
And then eventually it doesn't bother you anymore. A
Right.
way that a mentor of mine put it is you will continue to attract that which you judge until you no longer judge what you attract.
Yes.
And I
Beautiful.
and I thought it was like so perfect. Another way of saying it is life will continue to teach you the same lesson until you learn it.
Yeah.
And
And
in,
I think that's so important, too, Jamil, because one of the things that does happen in the cyclical version, and that's exactly how I believe it is. We're just going around, and as we gain more knowledge and wisdom, we're coming from a different frequency,
yeah,
and we're coming from a different perspective, and we're coming from a different vibration, and with greater wisdom.
yeah,
And so what we think is, okay, but I should have been able to, like I have a lot of clients, and I bet you do too. They're like, yeah, but I should have known this back then, or I should have done this back then. And we project our 53-year-old wise person onto our 30-year-old unaware person
yeah,
and stay in that judgment, which then keeps it cyclical. It keeps it cycling. But when we can go, I don't know what I don't know, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And now I know better and I'm doing better. And I love that your focus and the way you redirect every time, and I'm this way as well, is what's working,
yeah,
what's shifted that's positive, what's shifted that, okay, yeah, I'm at a 5 now. That's better than you were, right? We look at it as a lot of people will talk about peeling layers of the onion, and the onion's peeled, and the onion's peeled, and the onion's peeled. And that onion makes you cry all the way to the center.
yeah,
Until there's no more onion, you're crying. So you're still feeling it, and you're still peeling it, and there's still work to do. until it no longer is. But don't worry, something else will come up. I'm here to tell you,
Yeah.
something else will come up, even if you think you got it all figured out.
Yeah. Yeah. You said something that reminded me of guilt and shame from my perspective. It's present you holding past you to the
Yes,
standard of what you know now
yes,
and
exactly.
saying like you quote unquote should have known then what you know now, but that's not possible. Like
Right.
you didn't know. And so that's why holding on to these things, like you said, it just perpetuates that cycle. And
Yes.
something that I know that you do a lot of work around that I'd love to be, if you could share with us, can you speak to the power of group intention, group prayer, directed energy as a group as it relates to healing and why that can have an amplified effect?
Yeah. Gosh. I have so much experience with that. I have a couple private communities that one of the things that we offer in that community is prayer circles. And I had a very close friend of mine about 7 years ago that was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, metastasized to the bone throughout her body, tumors everywhere. And literally when we read her report, it literally was just, it was a death sentence. Like she's not going to make it. And of course, we walk through all the emotion that you go through. And then I'm kind of like, all right, well, what can I do? Right. So I'm not going to sit in the shit. That's not me. I don't sit here. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go higher. So higher to me, I'm like, okay, spirit, I need something that I can do, because I did need to do something. I felt like I needed to do something. I need something that I can do to serve to the highest level, obviously in honoring her journey. And Spirit said to me, um, it's too big, break it down. Because we were looking at tumors all over the body. We were looking at this huge diagnosis. And they said, break it down. And the way that I interpreted that was break down the body. And so what I did is, now I'm not a doctor like you, dude. So I don't know where all the different systems are. I don't know all that. So I had to go and get like a little anatomy map and go, okay. So I broke it down into all these different systems, and I went to my prayer circle group, and we had thousands of people, and said, okay, somebody's going to have her circulatory system. Somebody's going to have her brain. Somebody's going to have her eyes. Somebody's going to have her face. Somebody's going to have her breasts. Somebody's going to have her bone, her skeletons. And so we had thousands of people that were intentional, and what their focus was her highest, greatest good. It wasn't focused on this being a particular way, because I don't believe in that. I think we have to stay in the higher vision. But that was the focus, and visualizing that highest, greatest good for her with an open-ended what that is for her soul. 5 months she was in remission.
Yeah.
With no chemo. 5 months. Now, there's of course been struggle throughout that journey, because it is a long, hard journey, and there are lots of things to deal with, because I look at the emotional foundation of all of the illness that we manifest and where that's coming from as well, of course. But it was miraculous, and it was because of the power of intention, prayer, and I believe trusting the universal higher good, that we didn't get in the way.
Yeah.
It was powerful.
Yeah. So, so powerful. And I remember being in medical school, and in my first year, maybe second, there was a professor there. He was a physician, and he's been there for decades. And this guy was very well respected, and he was diagnosed with this form of cancer. And I remember that they did, and they said we're going to do like a prayer circle, and there was an email, and if anyone wants to join, they can join. And I attended, and in this lobby was 100 or something more people in a circle with a similar intention at the same time. And this physician was in the hospital at the time, and I had a class with him a year or two later, and he had said that when he found out about that the school did that for him, that he had felt that something was happening at the same time that that was going on. And then somebody told him after, and he's like, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And there's so many books that I've gotten to read over the last year or two that are specifically about that. with scientists doing experiments on group intention. There was one that was done, I think it was like there was like a World Meditation Day or something, and it was 1 million people in person.
Yep.
I think it was in
Yep.
India, and they all prayed for world peace. Or not prayed, but they meditated, a similar idea for world peace. And over the course of the next few weeks, I believe, the global crime rate went
Yes.
down like
Mhm.
sizably for no
Yep.
other apparent reason. And then there's smaller versions of that same study. You bring experienced and advanced meditators into a city, I think it was like Detroit or something like that, and they did it. And right after they did it for the next few days or week, crime just went down a sizable percentage. And something like that is very interesting. There's a lot of books and studies out there. If it's interesting to you, please reach out and I'd be happy to share it with you. And I know,
Let me share a real powerful one that that was really cool. Okay,
please.
this was really cool. So another friend had a diagnosis of a kidney stone, and not just a regular kidney stone. It was, I can't remember the name of it now. I'm losing my thought of it, but it was 50 times the size of a regular kidney stone.
Wow.
Okay, so they're like, yeah, you got to have surgery. And she called me and she's like, okay, well, what do I do? And I told her, okay, let's do this visualization. We'll start to visualize it, just breaking down, turning into lava, let's say, as far as the visual, and letting it just be absorbed through your body. So let's just start visualizing it breaking down. Melting is kind of what the idea of it was. And so there was a small group of us that focused on that. And so they wanted to do the surgery in 2 weeks. And she said, give me 6. Because that's what I thought. Like, I think we need about 6 weeks. So they scheduled it for 6 weeks. They did an ultrasound, and it's huge, this huge kidney stone. So we go in to go have it. Now she's having surgery, and we've been visualizing it the whole time. And we go to the doctor, and we're in the hospital, and they said they were using the same ultrasound that they had used from like 6 weeks ago. And I said, would you do another ultrasound? Because I think that it's gone. And the nurse looked at me and just laughed. And she rolled her eyes and she goes, these things don't just go away. The only way that they go, and I mean, just like this, the only way that they go is through surgery. And I'm like, well, would you just do an ultrasound anyway, just in case? And she's like, no, she's already prepped. Whatever. So the doctor came in and, okay, here we go. And I go, hey, would you just do an ultrasound? Just check, make sure that don't cut her open, right? If they don't, well, they were going to do laparoscopic, but don't go in there if you don't need to. So they ignored me and rolled their eyes, the whole thing. So we go into the cafeteria while they take her down. And the whole time I'm like, I cannot believe this. I just cannot believe that. I just don't think it's there. So I'm upset because they're going to put her through surgery, right? So we go in, and I go to the bathroom. And while I'm in the bathroom, I hear a message that says, hurry up because you're going to be needed. And I'm like, shit, what's going to happen, right? So I hurry up, wash my hands, and I come out, and her husband is waiting for me. He's like, they just called us back. And I'm like, why? And he goes, I don't know. So we go back. They did an ultrasound. It was gone.
Yeah.
They had no surgery to do. And when the doctor came in, he's like, well, these things are hard to explain. Sometimes we just think we see something. And I'm like, it's right there in that image, and it's not there in the other image. And then the nurse that rolled her eyes, I'm like, yeah, I know how these things work. Oh my God, it was so hard for me to keep my mouth shut. But literally a small group of people. This was 6 people.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
The power of our minds and the power of collective, intentional, loving energy changes the planet. It changes our health. It changes our mind. It changes our environment. It changes everything.
I so love that. Thank you for sharing these stories. And I hope that people can connect to them in a way that inspires and encourages hope, knowing that there's always something, that can be done, especially
Yeah.
with that first story, that example, both of them actually, but the first one with the tumors everywhere. And then here she is now doing so much better without the chemotherapy. And then here's this other person with this kidney stone and these medical professionals saying it only, goes away in this way. And then here they are with their mind expanded, Now they have a choice at that point, and I'm sharing this because this is metaphorical to our whole life.
Yeah.
They can then say it was there, now it's gone. Maybe there's something else at play. Or they can say it couldn't have been that. We must have made a mistake. And then they double down on the old paradigm.
Yep.
And then
And
they,
that's what they chose to do. And I recorded it because he said, we just can't understand this. So it must have been a wrong imaging or something like that. I'm like, okay, whatever, dude.
and so I want to be respectful of your time. And so as we wrap up, if our conversation today, Sunny, was your last opportunity to share with our listeners something that's on your heart that you want to make sure that they know, what would you love to leave them with?
Mm. Well, I think, my answer was different than it is right now because of the conversation we're in. And so I think what I would say is literally the power of your mind and your heart. It is miracles happen. I've witnessed so many throughout my career and in my life based on people choosing to be intentional with their mind and their body and their spirit and directing that in ways that are for your highest and greatest good. And you have power beyond measure and beyond what others around you might say. And when you make a choice to take steps towards those intentions, life responds.
Mm.
Life responds and healing happens and miracles occur.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well said. How can our listeners connect with you, learn more about what you're up to in the world, work with you, etc.?
My website, my name, Sunny Dawn Johnston with a T, .com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, all the places, and always happy to help support. And I just want to share real quick. This is so fun to be able to see what you're creating, Jamil, because you were one of the students that I've had in my life that was so oh my gosh, you are a student, like you are a learner, and you are so committed to learning as efficiently and as connect like you had such a connection to the energy work that you really were there from such an open-hearted place, and your willingness to show up, and then the ripple effect of how that has affected you, like the butterfly effect that you're talking about. This is why I do what I do, is to see that ripple effect. And it's so nice to see young people, and I'm not saying I'm way old, but I'm certainly not young. But to see young people that are out in the world doing the work that you're doing with the background that you have, because you can be taken from a different context and different perspective than someone that has done this my whole life. And a lot of people think I'm, kind of a quack and weirdo because of what I do, but you bring credibility to a field that has struggled to have credibility. And I really greatly, greatly appreciate you showing up and then spreading the word through your podcast, through the work that you're doing, helping others, of course, but spreading the word through your podcast and just being that light in this world at this time. So beautiful. And I greatly appreciate you.
Thank you. I receive that fully, and that puts a big smile on my spirit. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, my
So,
friend. Thanks, everybody.
thank you. And for our listeners, if this has been valuable to you, please share it far and wide, even if it's just with one person and not just as a minimizer. But if you can share it with somebody that maybe they're having experiences that they can't quite explain, and this conversation would give some context that would be really helpful for them. You never know that ripple effect that you can begin to create by sharing this. And if you can leave a comment, a review, a testimonial, wherever it is you're experiencing this right now, whether it's on I almost said Facebook, LinkedIn, but whether it's on a Apple or Spotify or YouTube, etc., it really goes a long way helping the algorithm, more people find the show. Anything you'd like to say before we wrap up, Sunny?
I appreciate you for watching, and I hope that you take some of these little nuggets of information and you let them ripple out into the world.
Beautiful. I call this show Transformation Starts Today because I find most people's favorite day to change their life is tomorrow, and that's why they stay stuck. But you can be different. You can apply what you experienced here today and begin to shift your life in a truly positive way. All my love to you and your loved ones. Happy holidays, and I look forward to the next time we connect. Take care. Thank you for being with us today. If this conversation served you, it would mean a lot if you left a review and shared this with anyone who may benefit. An extraordinary life without regret is available to you now. Choose it. It's your time.